This video explains why the United States should understand the similarities and difference between Vladimir Putin of Russia and Lenin and Stalin. Hello friends, this is Unmasked Truth with Harmanjeet Saini, where I provide unique analysis of world events based on the unmasked truth that after surrender, Germany continued World War II clandestinely and became a killing machine. I also provide true news that you will find nowhere else. It is foolish for anyone to predict the precise date when the Third World War might break out, because the aggressor can postpone the attack by a few days just to prove the prediction wrong. That's why I never set a precise date or even the year when the German, Chinese, Indian, and Muslim attack on the United States, Britain, and Israel might take place. But I do not ignore the strong signals to realize that the attack cannot be too far off. Russia is a very important player on the world scene and is crucial for any war and peace calculations for every side. That's why United States, Britain, and Israel need to pay attention to what he does or says. That is why I have discussed him a few times in my videos, in which I have also discussed his Jewish background. But I would like to caution the United States, Britain, and Israel to take into account the fact that though Putin is a Jew, he is still a Russian and head of state in Russia. He has certain constraints on how he must make decisions. His assistance or even staying neutral should not be taken for granted. To understand the constraints on Putin, we should learn from how Lenin and Stalin made decisions. It will come as a shocking surprise to most that both Lenin and Stalin were German masqueraders. One sure way to recognize masquerader leaders is that mass murders usually characterize their tenures. While the estimates of the number of people killed during the rulership of Lenin and Stalin vary, here are some of the massacres and deaths that took place during their rule. In the time of Lenin from 1917 to 1924, these are some of the killings that took place. Number 1. During the Red Terror, a term usually applied to Bolshevik political repression throughout the Civil War in Russia from 1917 to 1922, more than 10,000 were killed during the initial period. The total number of hostages and prisoners executed without trial numbered in the tens of thousands, whereas the total number of rebellious workers and peasants murdered are estimated to be between 100,000 to 200,000. Number 2. Concentration camps were established in which more than 70,000 were held during Lenin's time and used as slave labor. Many died due to the terrible conditions, though to keep the official number of deaths low, prisoners were released when they were just on the verge of death. Number 3. The famine of 1922 caused the deaths of an estimated 5 million people. The famine was exacerbated by government requisitioning as well as the export of large quantities of Russian grain. Number 4. In May 1922, Lenin issued a decree calling for the execution of anti-Bolshevik priests, causing between 14,000 to 20,000 deaths. In the First World War, Lenin advocated making peace with Germany and withdrawing from the war. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk was signed between Germany and Russia on March 3, 1918, which resulted in a huge loss of territory and resources for Russia. Germany gained control of 28% of Russian Empire's industry, 26% of its railway tracks, and 37% of its agricultural land, 3/4 of Russia's coal and iron deposits, and 26% of its population. The treaty was extremely unpopular in every political faction in Russia, and many Bolsheviks and socialists resigned from the Council of People's Commissars or Sovnarkom in protest. In signing the Brest-Litovsk Treaty, it seems quite clear that Lenin, being a German masquerader, gifted all the territory and assets to Germany, especially when it was desperately seeking to end fighting in the eastern sector so that it could concentrate on the western sector. It also helped him ensure the survival of his government and consolidate his power in Russia. Thus, Lenin was able to kill two birds with one stone. Now, here are some of the killings that took place in Stalin's time, who succeeded Lenin. Number 1. The total number of deaths attributed to Stalin's rule is estimated at about 20 million people. Secondly, the number of murders and deaths in the Gulag system, which was the chief administration agency in the Soviet Union in charge of forced labor camps. The number of murders and deaths in the Gulag system from 1929 to 1953 are estimated at 1.7 million. However, in order to keep the official number of deaths low, many people were released from the system when they were on the verge of death. Therefore, some researchers estimate the total death toll to be as high as 6 million people. Number 3. Tens of thousands were murdered in the concentration camps from the time Stalin took over to 1930. Number 4. 4 million Ukrainians and 2 million Kazakhs and others perished in the artificially created and systematically perpetuated famine of 1930 and 1932. Number 5. In the Great Purge of 1937 to 1938, an estimated 950,000 to 1.2 million were put to death. During this period, over 100,000 priests, monks, and nuns were executed, and 22,000 to 35,000 were executed in Mongolia, including 18,000 Buddhist lamas. Number 6. Following the Russian invasion of Poland, approximately 150,000 Polish citizens died due to Soviet repression throughout the war, including the murder of nearly 22,000 POWs and Polish intellectuals in the Katyn massacre. In the 1946-1947 famine in the Soviet Union, an estimated 1 to 1.5 million people lost their lives, in addition to population loss due to reduced fertility. Number 8. There were deportations and forced resettlement of nearly 6 million persons from 1920 to 1952, including 3.125 million from 1939 to 1952. The ethnic minorities thus displaced included Poles, Ukrainians, Balts, Moldovans, Bessarabians, Estonians, Volga Germans, Crimean Tatars, Chechens, and Ingush. Deaths due to forced resettlements are estimated at nearly 390,000 from the Soviet archives. The actual deaths certainly must have been higher. Now, Stalin was a German masquerader. That was probably the reason Russia signed the Ribbentrop-Molotov Non-Aggression Pact on August 23, 1939. According to the JewishVirtualLibrary.org, secret protocols of the treaty defined the territorial spheres of influence Germany and Russia would have after a successful invasion of Poland. According to the agreement, Russia would have control over Latvia, Estonia, and Finland, while Germany would gain control over Lithuania and Danzig. Poland would be partitioned into three major areas. The Wartheland area bordering Germany would be annexed outright to the German Reich, and all non-German inhabitants expelled to the east. More than 77,000 square miles of eastern Polish lands, with a population of over 13 million, would become Russian territory. The central area would become a German protectorate, namely the German Gouvernement, governed by a German civil authority. Hitler was a demon-possessed man, not just demon-influenced. Despite the treaty, due to the demon influence, he invaded Russia. Initially, Germany made great territorial gains, in part perhaps allowed by Stalin. Ultimately, Stalin had no choice but to defend Russia because if he did not, he would have been deposed and executed. Russian government and military around him constrained his choices. Putin, though a Jew, is similarly constrained in what he can do as leader of Russia. It is interesting that within 6 months of Stalin's death, a Jew named Nikita Khrushchev emerged as leader of the Soviet Union. He revised Stalin's policies of mass killings in Russia. Later, the German masquerader Mikhail Gorbachev emerged as leader and ruled Russia from March 10, 1985 to December 25, 1991. He was responsible for tearing down the Berlin Wall, making German reunification possible in 1989, and then German leaders knew that their man was in charge of Russia. As you can see from this brief Russian history, Putin as a Jew is constrained in what he can do as Russia's leader. Being a Jew, I think he realizes that Americans and the British are also descendants of the sister tribes of Israel. But the Jews are not in a majority in Russia. Putin must work only for what is in Russia's best interest. Just because Putin is a Jew, we should not expect him to automatically side with the United States, Britain, and Israel in a conflict with any other nations. I can explain the reason why with my personal example. I too am a Jew originally from Punjab state in India, but now an American citizen living in the United States for the past nearly 40 years. If ever heaven and Americans were on the opposite sides of a conflict, I would have no choice but to fight on because of people among whom I am living. Indeed, I would not want it any other way. If I was permanently living in Punjab, I would fight for Punjab. If I am permanently living in the United States, I would fight for America. That's what most Jews have done in their history. If I did not do that, I would most likely lose my life in the jurisprudence and then jeopardize the lives of my family members. That's the choice Putin faces. I am certain he wouldn't want it any other way either. I hope America, British Commonwealth nations, and the State of Israel take that into consideration when dealing with Russia. The similarities between Putin and Lenin, Stalin, therefore are that all three are not ethnic Russians. Lenin and Stalin were of German ancestry, whereas Putin is of Jewish ancestry. As a result, they were constrained somewhat in what they could do. They had to do what was in Russia's best interest, though both Lenin and Stalin tried as best as they could to help Germany. If they had completely handed over Russia to the Germans by not defending it, they would have been deposed and executed. Putin faces the same situation. He has to do what is in Russia's best interest, especially when his ancestry is known, whereas that of Lenin and Stalin, the ancestry is hidden. The difference between are that, because of the basic nature of Germans of love of violence and bloodshed, Lenin and Stalin were responsible for an estimated 25 to 30 million deaths in Russia. Putin, on the other hand, being a Jew, is not inclined to do any such thing. Even while dealing with the German masquerader Alexei Navalny, he is showing considerable restraint, though Navalny deserves to be summarily shot dead or killed in some other way. I hope America, Britain, and Israel do not come into direct major conflict with Russia as long as Putin is the ruler. He is doing what is in Russia's and his own best interest. We also should not expect any help from Russia in any fight with the German, Chinese, Indian, and Muslim alliance, if it jeopardizes Russia's security in any way. I hope this analysis will be helpful for America, British, and Israeli leadership when making decisions concerning Russia at war. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please continue to watch my videos and read articles on important world events, World War III watch, politics, international business, advice on health and medical problems, and much more for in-depth and insightful analysis. Please also subscribe to my YouTube channel Unmasked Truth with Harmanjeet Saini to provide and get information on the latest videos.